Yeah, so hi there. So we're going to look at the clock display program again, just to try to look at it a little bit more conceptually this time and see if that helps. So this is a diagram of the objects that are involved, some of the objects that are involved in doing clock display. So we have this clock display object down here. It controls two number display objects. This one on the right controls the minutes. That number display object controls two digit objects, right? This digit object controls the tens place of the minutes. This one controls the ones place of the minutes. This number display object, same thing. The left one controls the tens place of the hours. The right one controls the ones place of the hours, right? So when you make a new clock display, it creates these two guys, and these two guys create these four guys, right? And each of these create 10 square objects. So a lot going on when you make the clock display. So clock display is keeping track of the time, and when a minute is passed, or in our cases it's not an actual minute, but when a unit is passed, basically when the loop gets executed again, it calls number display and says, hey, okay, time to update your minutes. And so now minutes was 34, so now minutes is 35. So how do you separate the 3 and the 5? You use div and mod. You use mod to get the 5. So whatever variable is storing the number of minutes, you just mod it by 10, and that gives you the remainder, 5. And once you have that remainder value, you have a bunch of if statements, and they basically say if that value is 0, then call this digits display 0 method. If it's 1, display its 1 method, and etc. Right? And then how do you get the tens place digit? Well, the same thing. You take almost the same thing. You take value and you div it, which is just the standard division operator. But because we're dealing with integers, you get, in this case, a whole number representing the number of times. If you do that variable div 10, you get the number of times that 10 evenly goes into that number. So if it's 35, that's going to give us 3. And we do the same thing. We have a bunch of if statements that say, hey, okay, if one of which is if that value that we got by doing the div operation is 3, then call this guy's 3 method, and it puts the 3 back up there. All right, so this goes on and on, 35, 36, blah, 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 up to, right, we get to 60. And when we get to 60, we have code there that rolls it over to 0, right? Because we don't display 60 here, we display 59. And then when we get to 60, that's 1 hour, so that we reset this to 0 and then carry the hour over to here, basically, right? To the ones place of the hours number. So how does that happen? Well, you have to have something in here which after you increment, this guy says, hey, is this now 0, right? And if this is now 0, you know that it rolled over, so now you call this guy and you say, hey, it's time for you to update. And it does virtually the same thing as this did, except the only difference is, in this case, the limit, the maximum number that it can go up to is 24, right? And whereas this one, it was 60. And that's what's going on, right? So these are both objects of the same class. So how can they handle how can one handle hours and 1 minutes? Well, this one, you send it into this one as a parameter when you create it that the limit is 24, and you send it to this one when you create it that the limit is 60. So their code is the same, but they have a different state. Their fields have different values. And that difference in the value of the fields allows them to display different numbers. Okay? All right, now that we've done the conceptual walkthrough, let's go over here to the code. This is a working clock display program, but I'm not going to start with clock display. by making one of these, which would make those, and so on. I'm just going to make two number display objects. I'm first going to make one for these guys. Actually, I'll first make one for these guys, the hours, and then for the minutes. So we'll do a new number display object, and we'll call this one H for hours. We know the rollover is 24. We're going to put the ones position at 100 and the tens position at 25. And there, you can see that that turned out nicely. And now we're going to make another one. And this is for the minutes. And we know the rollover limit is 60. And we'll put the ones position at 250 and the tens position at 175. Excellent. Okay, so that you might want to put those a little further over, like 275 and 200. But at any rate, these are our hour digits, and these are our minute digits. Okay? Now, so let's, on the number display, let's do set value. We'll make that 11. And now we'll do increment. And we've got 11 there. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll do set value for the minutes, and we'll do 34. And we'll call its increment method. And now we've got 1134 here, right? And if I call this one's increment method, 35. So what happened there? Right, I called the increment method, which is obviously in this object. There's one in here too, right? But I called this one's because that was the one this red box represents that red box, which represents that number. So I told this guy to increment, right? So there's an increment method in here which added 1 to the value. It's now 35. We split that number using div and mod, got the 5, told this guy to get whatever the result of the mod was, and this guy to display whatever the result of the div was. That's a bunch of if statements in the increment method in here, right? And eventually this would get up to 60. And then, so this would see, when this gets to 60, it rolls to 0. So this has something that's checking every time after it calls increment. It says, hey, have you rolled over to 0? And if it has, it doesn't say, have you rolled over to 0? It says, hey, is your value 0? And it says, if your value is 0, it's time to tell this guy to increment the number of hours. So I'm not going to go through calling increment 26 times. I'm just assuming that that's 60. And now, so this guy gets a 0. It says, okay, time to increment him or her. And so we're going to increment that, and oh, it's so silly. I'm looking up here for this to change, right? Didn't change there, changed here. Okay, oh, that's crazy. I don't know, how many of you have an iPad or some sort of tablet, and after using your tablet for a while, you go to your computer, especially if it's a laptop, and at some point you reach up to the screen and tap on something or try. Mostly it's just tapping on something, just because you've been trained by using the iPad that's how you interact with the computer, and you forget that you need the mouse on the computer. Anyway, that's kind of what I just did here. So I covered a lot there. Let me just quickly review. So the clock display class makes two, when you make a clock display object, it makes two number display objects. Those two, each of those number display objects make two digit objects, which control, each pair of those control two numbers on the graphics display. Okay? If you have questions, don't hesitate to get in touch and ask. I will be happy to help you with this. This is a big project with a lot of pieces, and it's perfectly normal to be a little confused at this point. Okay? Good luck with this. Thank you.